It's always good to have some people awake at this service. It's always helpful, encouraging. Here, get everything situated up here. Um, we're continuing our series today on surviving the military marriage. We started it last week, and they were going in a little. We're actually talking about marriage. Last week we talked about general stuff. And we're talking about marriage, and I said last week, and I've said this for years and years and years, that I can't imagine someone coming up with a better way to challenge and frankly meat grinder marriages than what the military does. It's insane. And so here we are on the front lines with a church in a military community, and so we get to deal with it and how to confront it. And so if you're military, you have that challenge in you as far as your marriage, making it work in one of the most difficult situations I can imagine as far as just marriage and family. And then another part, and we're going to talk about that a lot today, is you live in a culture that lies to you. It just flat tells you things that aren't true, especially about marriage. Now, how do I have the audacity to tell you that our culture is lying to you about marriage? Look at our culture. Look at the divorce rate in our culture. Look at what happens, all the people who've been, I don't mean to, yeah, I do. All the people who've been preaching to Christians about morality and how better they are at morality than we are, and suddenly say, oh yeah, well the guys just molest women all the time over there. What? I think we've been saying no to that for a long time. I don't think we have to get in line. Over here, yeah, we've been saying the same stuff about marriage for 2,000 years. And our stuff works. Okay, and you can argue with us, you can fight us, you can say we're politically incorrect, you can say anything you want to say, but I will present it to you and say, our stuff works. Okay, it's not rocket science, it's not genius, it just works. I was talking to a pastor just recently, a very large church. He's been at it a long time, I've been at it a long time, and you ever get one of those, we all, as people, we have little semi-competitive conversations. And we were talking, and we were having a good time. He's a great guy. And we were talking about how, number one was what I just told you, how basic God's principles for marriage are. They're just basic. They're not complicated. And then we're talking about how well they work. And so we start doing this little one-up thing where who have you dealt with that was the farthest gone as far as their marriage when they came to you? And I tell him the story about, I had a couple who came to me who it was illegal, for them to be in my office. Because one of them had a restraining order of the other one, and they weren't supposed to be within so many 100 yards, and they were in my office sitting right here, and we're talking about marriage. They're in the last stages of the divorce paperwork with restraining orders, and they chose to apply God's principles to their marriage, and God saved their marriage. Okay? I mean, it's not me, it's the principles, it's nothing. And so, of course, he's been at it for even longer than I have. So he can top me. He goes, I had a couple, came in, a little bit older. She didn't know it. He had been a serial adulterer. They were able to identify 15 affairs he'd had over the years. Affairs, not talking about the one-night stands. I'm talking about the affairs. And they're in his office, and he is confessing to at least 15 affairs. And okay, no. As it turned out, he was fully repentant. He got busted, and he didn't deny it, he didn't deflect it. He acknowledged it, he owned it, he forgave, he confessed the sin of it. His wife chose, and she didn't have to, she chose to give him another chance. They started applying the principles, and God saved their marriage. Okay? So you may be here today and you think you got challenges. You might. You probably do. They're all challenged. God's principles work. We see it really easy. If you want to turn on your Bible to Matthew chapter 7. There's a real famous passage. A lot of you guys know this, but I'm going to point out a couple of little interesting things about it as we get started. It's Matthew chapter 7, and a lot of you guys could tell this story. Matter of fact, many of you have told this story or sung a song about this story. And even if you aren't a Christian or have never been in church much in your life, just a new Christian, you're going to say, hey, I understand that story. I've heard something like that. Matthew 7, starting in verse 24. Anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on a solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against the house, it won't collapse because it's built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rain and floods come and the winds beat against the house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. Now, here's one thing that happens with Christians if we're not careful. You guys knew that story, right? Some of you guys may be new to church and you don't know that story, but most of you guys who've been in church you knew that story, right? You knew exactly what I was going to say. Now, if I were to ask you a question, I wonder if you get it right, though. Jesus says you're supposed to build on the solid foundation, the rock. What's the rock? No. I knew people would say that. Because what did he say? Verse 24, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. It's not Jesus, it's Jesus' teaching and Jesus' wisdom and God's wisdom and God's principles. Okay, that's the rock. The rock is not, so if we're not careful, we'll get overly spiritual. Can we do that? We can do that. What's your marriage? We build it on Jesus. What's that mean? Jesus? No, when you say Jesus, Jesus? No, it's built on God's wisdom, God's principles, Jesus' teaching. What he said, if you build your life on the principles that are put forth in the Bible, you will have success. You can't, and I don't mean monetary success. I don't mean everything's going to go wrong in your life. I just mean that over the course of your life, you will find success and fulfillment. Okay, that's how that works, with plenty of pain. But here's what it says in Psalm 119:1. How happy are those whose way is blameless, who walk according to the Lord's instruction? Because, see, success comes by living in harmony with God's wisdom and standards. Now, two things before we get into specific marriage stuff, I need to tell you. Number one, and I kind of alluded to this already, God's principles are frequently at odds with our natural tendencies. What God says to do a lot of times is backwards from what we think should do because we're screwed up. Okay? You don't ask a crazy person for directions, right? Right? And we're crazy. And so what we think will work, a lot of times won't work. The exact opposite works. Matter of fact, I'll give you an example. When it comes to your finances, if your finances are screwed up, which a lot of people's finances are screwed up, right? That's the default setting for finances. That's also screwed up. And you go to God's Word and say, what should I do about my finances? How should I handle my finances? And you expect, okay, budgeting. No, the first thing that God says to do, if you want to get your finances under control, is give Him the first portion of your income. You're going, but I don't have enough money as it is. He goes, trust me on this one. I'm going to teach you to trust me. You give me the first portion. I will teach you to trust me. I will then teach you how to handle it better, and I will show you that you can, A, trust me, and B, I will teach you to be generous, which fights against your tendency to be selfish. Okay? So he doesn't align with what our culture says. He doesn't align with what our brain says. He just aligns with himself, and he's the creator of the universe, and so he's right. I don't see why people think that's weird. People act like, oh, why would you believe what God says? You mean the all-knowing creator of the universe? I would classify that as expert. And so I listen, okay? So God's principles tend to be at odds frequently. Another thing I want you to see, and this is directly from that little story, because you've got your two houses, one built on the rock, one built on the sand. Have you ever noticed the house built on the sand didn't have any problems until the storm came? They built the house, it's on the sand, no foundation matters, and they're perfectly cool. Matter of fact, they're enjoying the beach, right? Until the storm comes. Because the more difficult your situation, the more vital are God's principles. The more difficult your situation, the more vital are God's principles. Which could apply to a military situation. Okay? If you are in a military marriage, it goes up 2 notches that you pay attention to God's principles for marriage. Now, they work for everybody. God doesn't have a separate set of principles. He doesn't say, oh, here's the principles for military and here's the principles for civilians. They're the exact same principles. Matter of fact, today we're going to talk about the principles. That's what we're going to talk about. We're not going to go into details. If you want the details, the book's in the back. You can get it there. But we're going to talk about the principles, and it becomes crucial for everybody, but especially for people who have difficult circumstances, that you pay attention to the principles. I don't know how many people end up with messed up marriages, and they mess up one marriage, and they come back to the next one, and they don't go back to the principles, so they just mess up another marriage. I have people who've had like 3 marriages, and they come to me saying, my first 3 spouses were just... I'm like, you know what all 3 of your marriages so far have had in common? You. So, you need to pay attention to God's principles. Let me give you this. This is just a little freebie to start with. Whether you're in a military marriage or a regular marriage, there are a couple places you need to go in the Bible and you need to get familiar with to find wisdom. One of them is the book of Proverbs. Proverbs has wisdom on all things. It's just all over the place wisdom. There's a lot of stuff about marriage, a lot of stuff about families. It's a great book, and conveniently, it's 31 chapters long that aren't that hard to read. I would challenge you, if you're wanting to dig in and get some wisdom, take a year, you and your spouse or you and your kids if they're old enough, and read 1 chapter of Proverbs every day for a year. Now, just pick whatever day it is, do that. There's 31 chapters. In February, just do 28 and start over. Just whatever day of the month it is, that's the chapter we're reading today. You could start today. Just open up to chapter 19, read it together, and just keep moving. You do that for a year, God will work. He will do work in your marriage. Second thing is this. God put in the Bible, in the New Testament, the part written after Jesus came, 3 different household codes. Twice Paul writes one and one Peter writes one, where they just go in and take roughly a chapter, it's usually spread a little bit, where they take about a chapter and they just talk about the nuts and bolts of family. They talk about how to have a good marriage, how to have good kids, how to do good in your work. It's really good. If you have a bulletin, I've got all 3 of the household codes written there. If you're online with the Bible.com or if you use the QR code, they're all there. If not, I'll tell them to you, but I'm going to tell them to you too fast to write down. So you can email me and I'll send them to you. There's one in Ephesians 5, verse 21 through 6, verse 9. Colossians 3, verse 16 through 4, verse 6. And one in 1 Peter 2, verses 11 through chapter 3, verse 7. I don't know why all of them got split in chapters, but they did. But if your marriage is challenged, get into those 3 passages and just dig into them and start studying and learning them, okay? But you didn't come here for me to tell you what to read. You came for me to tell you what to do. So we'll start, or how to think about it or whatever. Anyway, all the household codes, all 3 of them that are in there, the teaching about marriage is boiled down in one verse in one of the codes. And that's in Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 33. And it says this: each one of you must love his wife, talking to the husband, as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Which gives us the foundations for a successful marriage. And again, they're not that complicated, although we do mess them up anyway. And the foundations for a family success are love and respect. Love and respect. That's not big words, not challenging words, but the problem is we misunderstand the words, we misdefine the words. So I'm going to talk to you today about love and respect and helping you understand them. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to talk to the husbands. Start here. And husbands, what does it say is your thing? Love your wife. What he does, and this is very important because it speaks to the biggest lie that we face, is what he starts out with is he gives the husband a mission. Now, the problem we have is most of the stuff that our culture talks about when it comes to marriage and relationships is warm and fuzzy, isn't it? It's about flowers and roses and oogly googly stuff. Guys, how good are you at roses and flowers and oogly googly jewelry stuff? Not real good. I'm not. That's just not my language, right? And the problem we run into is that they say, husbands, love your wives. And our culture defines love as oogly googly. And number 2, and you may not have noticed this, our culture defines love selfishly. Our culture defines love as what makes me feel good or happy. For instance, I love pizza. I love ice cream. I got a food thing. Okay? And I love pizza. Why? Because pizza makes me feel good. It tastes good, it makes me feel good. Why do I love ice cream? It tastes good, makes me feel. Why do we love? And we love things that make us feel good. So love becomes something that is all about us and feelings. And dudes, generally speaking, aren't as great at feelings. So if you read all the teaching in the Bible about husbands, you'll find, first off, that he describes it in terms of a mission. Now, I'm not good at oogly googly. I'm good at missions. You give me a mission, I can knock that puppy out. Right? My wife and I, we were in Gettysburg a couple weeks ago, and we were on Saturday. We went to a little shopping outlet things, and all that. And we went around, and she picked out some clothes. We separated. We got clothes. And she got some clothes, and I picked out a few clothes. And we got back to the hotel that night, and I said, there were a couple things I think I might have should have got. I could use a couple more of these. So tomorrow, before we leave, let's go by there, and I'll get those things. And we get there, and I said, wait in the car, because I got this. Because for a guy, shopping is a mission. It is hunting. I am going to identify, locate, and annihilate. Okay? That's what I'm going to do. So, honey, you're just going to slow me down. So she waits in the car. I go in the store. I actually take longer than I expected. I come back, and she's like, what? Don't worry. One more store. Pow. Done. Guys, you do know why you find shopping with your wife so frustrating? Because for you, shopping's a mission, and for her, it's a social event. You're going hunting, and she's going shopping. You ever have your wife come home from a shopping trip with nothing and consider it a success? How can that be a mission? The word is shopping, and you did not shop. You brought back nothing. You didn't shop. You browsed. And you went with her thinking you were shopping and you were browsing. And you're frustrated the whole time. That's why guys are frustrated. That's why guys want to crawl inside that the rack of clothes that's circular. We want to crawl in there with a video game. Because we're looking for a mission. We live for missions. So God gives us in the household codes, it's not that complicated, mission. Matter of fact, this is interesting. If you go read those codes, it will talk about relationships, and it will talk about raising children. And guys, gals, this is going to freak you out. It never mentions wives dealing with children. It mentions husbands dealing with children. What? Why? It's his mission. The family is his mission. God gives you a mission, guys. Now, the culture lies to you if you're a guy. The culture lies to you and tells you you're Homer Simpson. Oh! Right? That's the archetype guy now. It's Homer. He's pretty incompetent. The family runs much smoother when he's not there. And the best thing that he can do for the family is to butt out and let the competent wife handle things, right? That's what culture tells you. And as guys, there's a dis-ease, there's an unease that we naturally have because, number one, we don't think we're worthless. We think we're screwed up. We don't think we're worthless. And culture is saying that when it comes to family things, that men are worthless. Matter of fact, I know a prominent Christian counselor, and his view of marriage is listen to whatever the wife says because guys are stupid. And I'm like, I think I missed that when I was reading, the Bible. because it gives men the mission of the family, and that mission is love, but it doesn't just leave the word love out there where we can be going, oh, I've got to be warm fuzzy toward my kids. And some days that's hard, like days that end with a Y. So the household codes, they give us a definition of love so we can know what they're talking about. In that same one we just read in Ephesians 5:33, if you go back a few verses, it defines love for it. It says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy. And I see a couple things in there. And the first one is, as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And if I was going to put a word on that, it would say the first thing about love is selfless. It's not about me feeling good. Matter of fact, what's the example? As Christ loved the church and gave himself up to make up for her. I'd say this: love is concerned with neither good feelings nor self-satisfaction. Of all the ways Jesus must have felt while loving the church all the way to the cross, good isn't one of them. Here's how I know Jesus loves me. Well, the Bible tells me so. No, that's cool and all. I know Jesus loves me because when push came to shove, he picked up a huge piece of wood, put it on his shoulders, carried it up a hill with somebody else's help, let them nail him to it, and he died to restore a relationship with us because we couldn't do it. That's love. I really don't think Jesus was whistling as he's carrying the cross. I don't think he's going, this makes me feel all fuzzy. I'm getting a tingly feeling. My heart just goes pitter-patter. Yeah, that's because it's exploding in your chest. Okay? Jesus did not do something that was emotional. He did something that was practical, and it was completely selfless. And so if you're going to be loving, guys, it starts out with being selfless. Okay? The second part is even weirder. Well, that one's hard. This one's weird. Because it said that he, how do you say it? Loved the church, gave himself up for her to make her, anybody looking at it right now? To make her what? Holy. Now everybody just checked out. Because what it just said is, the husband's job isn't to make his wife happy, it's to make her holy. And now you're going in weird places, right? You're going, holy? You mean like, making sure she just sticks in this little box and doesn't do anything and never does anything wrong and wears, the Christian version of a burqa? Those like Amish, the people they're wearing something that's down just, they drags on the ground when they walk, and they cover up their sleeves and wear gloves and hats so you can't actually see there's a human in there. Okay, is that what when you say holy, is that what you're talking about? No. Not even close. That misses the mark about as far as you can miss it, because holy isn't just about not doing wrong. Matter of fact, if you go to Romans 8:29, one of my favorite verses, says, those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. See, becoming holy means embracing the things that would draw us closer to God and make us more like him. Now let me give you an example of this. What's the first thing we learn about God in the Bible? What's the very first thing, those of you who've been around a little bit, what's the first thing we learn about God from the Bible? Let's start at the beginning of it. In the beginning, God, what? Created. Now think about that for just stop. If you're writing the Bible, what's the first thing you want to communicate about God? Holiness, love. The first thing the Bible reveals to us about God, except maybe for his genuine existence, is that he is creative. That is the first thing that God chose to reveal to us about himself, is that he is creative. Anybody have a creative spouse? So if my spouse tends toward creativity, and I, as her husband, help her live into that creativity, I am helping her become more like God, which means she is getting more holy. Didn't see that one coming, did you? No. Think about all the things you know about God, and think about your spouse and all the things that your spouse, guys, all the things that she naturally wants to exhibit. And your job is to help her live into it. Helping a person become holy is helping them fulfill all the dreams God has for them. Helping a person become holy is helping them to live into all the dreams God has for them. Guys, that's your mission. If I was going to define it, which I'm going to, love is unselfishly seeking the fulfillment of another. Because Jesus came to lift us out of our sin, out of our depravity, out of our lostness, and not just bring us to himself, but to make us the masterpieces he created us to be. And guys, your mission is to go into your family as God's representative to unselfishly help everyone in your family live into all that God dreams they can be. That's your mission. 1 Peter 3:7, one of the other household codes, says it this way. Husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. And two things I always like to point out about that. Number one, dwell with your wife in an understanding way, which means you need to understand your wife. To which you reply, what? There's no understanding women. You are not asked to understand women. You are asked to understand one woman. Your job is to know her better than any other human being on earth so you can see the dreams God has for her and help her live into them. And there, we're now fighting the second lie the culture tells us. Because the culture tells men that they're worthless in families, it tells women that they're worthless in general. We say the exact opposite. All the media says the exact opposite with their words, but what exactly do they present? My wife and the daughter that's still at home, and the other daughters actually, they watch this show called Runway. What is it? Project Runway. And because I live in the house, I have to have a mild awareness of what's going on, even if I am distracting myself with my laptop the entire time it's on. This season, they did something interesting. They decided to bring in plus-size models, women who weren't size 2, okay? And they acted like that was this huge win for all women. But I noticed, as I glanced up from my computer, there was a standard for the plus-size models, too. And only a few women in America who are plus size matched up with their definition of what's acceptable. And so, guys, can I tell you this? Your culture continuously tells your wife that she's not good enough. The culture says she's not attractive enough, she's definitely not built right, she doesn't fit our standards, she's not living up to all the expectations that we have for her as a woman, because right now she's not both President of the United States, raising a perfect child while curing malaria. Okay? That's the culture. That's what they tell our women constantly. Oh, by the way, she's also insanely good in bed. Right? Isn't that what the culture says? Look at the cover of every magazine. She's supposed to look like this, think like this, act like this, and just rock your world. And that's the ideal. That's the standard they're presented with constantly. And guys, your wife is told 24/7 by the culture that she's not good enough for God to have dreams for. And your mission, should you choose to accept it, and you darn well better, is to let her know continuously the culture is lying. To let her know that she is special, that she is beautiful, that she is wonderful, that she is talented, that God has fearfully and wondrously created her. Special, for dreams he has for her, and you tell her this constantly, you don't ever have to tell your wife anything negative. The culture will handle that for you. Your job is to love her so much that eventually she starts to believe it. Love her so much that she eventually starts to believe that she can do anything God designed her to do. That she can be the person not our culture says she's supposed to be, that God created her to be. That's your mission. Convince her of it, love her into it, and help her develop toward it. And with all the culture says, that's a sufficient mission, guys. That will occupy you. Now, should I talk about the women now? You don't want me to. You really don't. Because it says, wives, your purpose, your goal, your thing is to respect your husband. Notice how that goes exactly opposite what culture tells you you're supposed to do about your husband. Right? Culture says he's worthless. Your job's to respect him. Now, you're okay up till now, although some of you are going, have you met my husband? Let me read you Colossians 3:18, because in the household codes, it says respect one time. Every other time it uses a different word. And it's in Colossians 3:18, one of the other household codes. It says, wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting for those who belong to the Lord. In other words, respect is another word for submission. The root of respect is submission. And now you're going, Steve, the culture tells us the exact opposite of that submission is a bad thing, that my job is to stand up for my rights, to proclaim who I am, and to be independent because I don't need him for anything at all except maybe to help us make babies, and we're going to scientifically eliminate him from that one of these days. Again, what is their divorce rate? Now that you're really unhappy, maybe I should define the word submission. Because the word submission has two parts. The first part is the word sub, which means beneath. And the second part is the word what? Mission. Have you seen that word before? Oh yeah, we started with it. The husband has a mission. What is the husband's mission? To selflessly help you, the wife, live into all that God dreams you can be. And your job? Help him. Help him what? Help him help you live into all that God designed you to be. That is submission. It's not, guys, forcing your opinion, trying to conform a woman to your image to make her what you want her to be. In all the household codes, it talks about the word submission. At no point does it ever tell the guy anything to do with his wife's submission. It says, wives, submit to your husbands. It never says, guys, enforce that. Some guys have this idea, and this is why people run away from this. They have this idea because they miss the definition of love, that for a woman to submit to a husband means that he's supposed to be a dictator. He's supposed to be ruling over. Well, dudes, you are not called to be a dictator, with or without the tater. Pastor Jose insisted I work that in. Your job is not to oppress your wife, to form your wife, to control your wife. Your job is to love her so much and so knowledgeably and so well that she grows into the person God designed her to be. If you picture, she's like a flower, and your job is to make her blossom. And again, it's really hard to do this because the culture tells her she's a weed. The culture tells her she's not beautiful, she doesn't have potential. Your job is to fight culture at every stand and just constantly tell her how valuable she is, and then her job becomes really easy if you're doing it right, as she now allows you to help her. She's now works with you. Colossians 3:19 says, husbands, love your wives and never treat them harshly. Husbands, love your wives and never treat them harshly. So, we've got a really cool thing coming in here. Because what's happening is I've got a husband here. And he has reported to his commanding officer, God. And God has handed him a mission. See that woman right there? I got dreams for that woman. I got plans for that woman. I created her. I knit her together in her mother's womb to accomplish some great things. I call her one of my masterpieces. And your job is to pour your life into making her all that I designed her to be. Do you accept your mission? Yes, sir. As the husband does this, you know what becomes very easy for a wife to do to a husband who is loving her that way? She respects the daylight out of that guy. And the more she respects him, the more she reflects how much she appreciates what he's doing for her, how he's selflessly living for her to become all that God created her to be. She respects him more. He senses the respect, because guys are drawn to respect like moths to flames, man. We like that respect. We eat that up. And we're drawn to that. And suddenly we're even more motivated to pour more into our wives to help them become more and more what God created them to be, which makes them respect us more, which makes us love them more, which makes them respect us more. Or you can choose, guys, to be selfish, or you can choose not to make her holy. Ladies, you can choose not to respect your husband even if he's doing something right. And instead of the cycle spinning in the positive way, with your respect driving his love and his love driving your respect, your disrespect drives away his love, which makes you disrespect more, and the cycle spins the other direction, and it spins to either divorce or despair. That's how it works. It's God's system. It's pretty simple, and it's really cool. Because what if kids enter the equation? What's the purpose of, why do you have kids? Let's see, we have a definition for love, don't we? Unselfishly seeking the fulfillment of another. See, God has dreams for those kids of yours. God has plans for those kids of yours. Guys, what's your mission? Help my children grow into all that God dreams they can be. Wives, what's your mission? Help. Cooperate. Now, I know, let me just say, for some of you that's kind of hard because your kids are under 3 and you really don't see God being able to do much of anything with these things. You know, you're in total disaster, create, control mode, right? So here let me help you out. Eventually those toddlers become children and those children become human. It happens like 9 times out of 10. Okay? And your work is rewarded. But it works together. It's all the same system. Guys, it's all the same mission. You're finding your wife and you're finding your kids and you're helping them. You are unselfishly helping them grow into everything that God dreams they can be. You're helping them find fulfillment. And in doing that, that was the other thing from that other passage where it talked about the fact that you're to love your wives with knowledge and be connected to them, because your fulfillment's found here. Your fulfillment is found in selflessness. Remember I started out saying that sometimes when God tells us something that seems backwards from what our world tells us, guys, your fulfillment is found in not seeking your fulfillment, but seeking somebody else's. Now, let me wrap it up with a little something. because I know there are people in here, probably some guys, who are kind of dissatisfied with your marriage right now. Maybe you haven't said anything about it. There's a little tingle in the back of your head. Let me give you some reasons why that's happening and how to fix it. Number one thing that guys can do that'll mess up their feeling of fulfillment, substitute another mission. Instead of seeking God's primary mission of developing your family, let your job be your primary mission. Sacrifice your family for your job. Now, I know there's always checks and balances and there's limitations, but your number one priority has to be your family. Not in what you say, but in how you act. Okay? So your number one mission, that's why I say mission, because if I say, what's most important to you? You'll say family because you've been trained to say that. But if I come to you and say, what's your mission? You'll probably start talking about your job. And if your job overreaches your family, you're going to feel dissatisfied with your family because you're not doing your part. Another thing that can mess you up is living selfishly, I mean. It's again one of those backwards things. The more selfish you are, the less satisfied you are. It's the way God wired us. Okay, so don't be selfish, be selfless. Guys, if you catch yourself being selfish, you'll find yourself being dissatisfied. Okay? By the way, that works for women too. Another thing, guys, if you're not trying to help your wife and your family become holy, you're going to be dissatisfied because there's going to be something that doesn't work. And let me give you quickly what that can be. You can substitute, you can be I've met guys who are incredibly selfless, incredibly invested in their families, but they're investing in their families the wrong way, for the wrong stuff. I usually save this for the family series. I'll talk about raising kids. But let me put this to you gently. Your kid's not going to the Olympics. Your kid's not playing in the NBA. They're not going to be an NFL cheerleader, and you really shouldn't want them to be. Okay? So quit investing an inordinate percentage of your life to help your child become a very good middle school athlete. Because I know so many, and there's nothing wrong with your kids being in sports. There's nothing wrong with a balanced view of that thing. But I know so many people who are putting their entire life on hold so their kid might get a scholarship and sit on the bench at a college somewhere, and a partial scholarship at that. Let me just, if your kid was going to the Olympics, you'd know it by now. I was at West Virginia University and at a basketball game, and we always went to the games really early so we get some great seats as students. And they realized it was kind of cool. They bring in stuff to sort of entertain us. And one year, some of you have heard this story before, one year they brought a little gymnastics club up from a little town called Fairmont, which is just south of the school. And they brought the gymnastics team up. And there were these, 4 or 5 through 9, 10-year-old girls out there flipping. It was fascinating. We were enthralled. Homework gets done. And another girl came out, and she wasn't any bigger than the rest of them, but she went to do like a little tumbling run. She hit the top of the building. She was like, bong, bong, bong. Like, what? We all going, wow, what is that? That was Mary Lou Retton. Won the all-around gold medal just a few years later. And at the age of 9, it was fully obvious this girl was different than everybody else in the room. Those who make it to the NFL, those who make it to the NBA, those who make it to the highest levels, they're already showing it way earlier. So relax a little bit. Stick to your real mission. Okay? Your mission isn't a partial scholarship to college. Your mission is for your children to discover and live into all that God dreams they can become. So get your mission straight. If your mission's not straight, you're going to be frustrated. You're going to be dissatisfied in your marriage and family. And then, final piece, You might be dissatisfied because your wife's not supporting your mission. And you've got two choices if your wife's not supporting your mission. One, you can try to take control. You can turn into a drill sergeant. You can start bossing her around. You can be a dictator, with or without. Will not work. Won't. What will work? Double down on this. Double down on loving her. Double down on being selflessly committed to her living into everything God dreamed she could be. Double down on telling her the culture is wrong when they talk about her. Guys, you should swap places with me just once. When I start talking about God's truth for women and the culture's truth for women, you should swap I should put a GoPro right here and let you watch your wife while I'm talking about that. You should just watch. It's like we could turn the lights out because the women just light up. When I start talking about who they really are in Christ as opposed to what the culture says they are. If she's bucking you, if she doesn't like it, it's because she doesn't trust you. You've been screwing up too much. And you got to prove her wrong. And you prove her wrong by just loving her in such an incredible amount for such an incredibly long period of time that she can't help but start believing in you. I mean, when you first start, guys, when you first start trying to live selflessly for her that way, she's going to say, well, it's that time of year. He just heard Steve preach on it. He'll be done by Christmas. But if you're living it in May, she can't help but be convinced that you mean it. If you're turning things down, if your selfishness is dropping like a rock and you are selflessly committed to helping her and your children, if you have children, live into all that God designed them to be, and you just keep it up and you just keep pouring into them, you'll make a believer out of them. They will come around. And that's how you overcome all the stuff in our culture. That's how you get past all the lies, is by living the truth. And of course, if you're going to live the truth, that starts with acknowledging the big truth. The big truth that Jesus Christ wasn't just a man, that Jesus' words are the solid foundation, the rock you can build your life on. Because he modeled selflessness when he came to earth, not to fulfill his own needs, but because you were separated from God. And he died to restore you to a relationship with him. And I'm betting there are a couple guys in here that when it comes to church, you got a drug problem. Because your wife drug you to church. Okay? And you're coming because, happy wife, happy life. And so you come and you sit here during the services and you think, it's not as boring as I thought it would be. And you've been drugged for a little bit, but it's time for you to break that addiction and form a relationship with Christ. And if you're ready to talk to somebody about having a relationship with Christ, that's what we have the blue bags for. We have on the back table. We've got some tables right there. If you just grab one of these blue bags, there's some people who have been trained. They'll take about 10 minutes. They'll walk you through the content of the bag, show you how to have a relationship with Christ so that you can truly live selflessly into all that God wants you to become. If you have the relationship with Christ, the next thing up is to tell your kids. And one of the best ways to tell your kids is to be baptized. If you've never announced to the world through baptism that you're a follower of Christ, that's one of the best things you can do for yourself, for your relationship with God, and for your kids, because it just proclaims it. That's what it's about. Baptism is about proclaiming you're a follower of Christ. If you'd like to be baptized, we do that the first Wednesday of every month. Just let us know. We'll be glad to work you into the next one. It's also possible that I've been talking, God's been kind of mushing around in the feels section of your life. and you're feeling maybe a little guilty, you're feeling a little committed, you're feeling like you want to turn over a leaf and change for real this time, you're feeling like you want the transitions to be lasting through May. If you'd like to pray about that, maybe both of you together, maybe your spouse is here and you've both been messing up the cycle. Maybe you just want to recommit. You've been doing an okay job, but just want to one more time lay it out there. You're going to go over it. We got a cross over there. It's a place for you to go and pray. If you want to pray about that, anything else, maybe your spouse isn't here. You want to pray for your spouse. Anything in the world, nobody's going to check you. You can go over and just pray during this next song. About anything you want to pray about. You want to pray with somebody? We've got some people lined up around the outside of the room. You can pray with them about anything you want to pray with them. You just approach them and say, hey, would you pray with me about this? And they'd be glad to do it. The world is lying to you. Guys, they're lying to you about what you can do in your marriage and your family. Your fulfillment lies in rejecting the lies and living into the truth. Women, the world is lying to you. They're setting you standards you can't meet and calling you a failure because of it. They rarely do it in words, but they do it constantly in images and choices. And you need to live into the truth and reject the lie. And as you do that together, as you reject the lies the culture tells you, and you work together to live into the truth that God gives us, God can fix your marriage. God can make your marriage great. I started out and told you the stories. Couples with restraining orders, couples with... I had one a few months ago. About the same time I had the one with the restraining order. And there was a couple in my office. And honestly, the stress of his military lifestyle had just beat him down. And he'd made some bad decisions. And I'm talking, and his wife really wants to save it, and I didn't think he was willing to do what it took. And I don't know if he was even able. He'd been through a lot. And I'm being really honest. We stopped our counseling session, and I thought they were done. When they left that day, I was convinced their marriage was over. And when I was working on the book, she sent me a message, an email. And she had doubled down on being the woman God made her to be. She had chosen to live into God's standards in spite of the way he was, his attitude and everything else. And because she did that, God wore him down. They're together. They're happy. Because even if it's just one of you, if you're willing to double down on God's standards for what you need to do in your marriage, God can work. And if there's two of you, and you've got so much baggage you don't think there's any way in the world God can fix it, you're wrong. Because we're talking about a God who parted a Red Sea. We're talking about a God who spoke the universe into existence. We're talking about a God who raised his son from the dead. And even if you think your marriage is dead, you can be thankful because you serve a God who's on the resurrection business.